East African history. The Oman Arabs at the East African coast. The Oman Arabs at the East African coast 1700–1888. After the final defeat of the Portuguese in 1698, the Oman Arabs imposed themselves over the East African coast as the new rulers. This was a period of the Yoruba ruling family in the Oman Empire. They came from a country called Oman in northeast Africa. Mombasa was to become the center of Oman rule at the coast. Why the Oman Arabs wished to control the East African coast? Politically, the Oman Arabs wanted to exercise their political powers by imposing themselves as the new rulers of the coast. The Oman Arabs also wanted to impose taxes on the East African coastal people so as to generate revenue for their country Oman. The Oman Arabs wanted to rule the coast as compensation for helping the coastal people defeat the Portuguese, i.e., they believed that their help was not for free. The East African coast was free from conflicts compared to Oman, which had the Yoruba Busedi family conflict. The Oman Arabs wanted to control the coast to make sure that the Portuguese did not return. E.g. in 1778 the Portuguese tried to recapture Fort Jesus, which scared the Oman Arabs. Mombasa, which was under the Masri Arabs, was rebellions to Oman rule. Therefore the Oman Arabs wanted to crush Mombasa and set an example to other towns. Economically, the Oman Arabs wanted to gain from the profitable Indian Ocean trade, e.g. they wanted to control the gold wealth in Kuwait. The coastal climate was favourable for agriculture compared to the arid conditions in Oman. The coast was blessed with fertile soils for agriculture, hence the Oman Arabs wanted to set up plantations. The East African coast was also strategic enough with good natural harbours which could allow big ships to anchor. The Oman Arabs wanted to effectively exploit the cheap slave labour at the coast, i.e. they did not want to use fellow Muslims as workers. Socially, the Oman Arabs wanted to strengthen and spread Islam, which had greatly declined during the Portuguese rule. East African history. The Oman Arabs at the East African coast. Masri conflicts of 1698 and 1840. The Busedi were a ruling family in Oman. The Masri were the coastal Arab rulers of Mombasa town. The struggle or conflict started in 1698 after the Portuguese had been defeated at the East African coast. The Oman Arabs. Reasons why the Busedi conflicted with the Masri between 1698 and 1840. The conflicts were sparked off by the failure of the Masri governors of Mombasa to recognize the rule of the Busedi family, who had taken over the control of the Oman Empire in 1741. After overthrowing the Yoruba dynasty, the Oman Arabs under the Busedi family wanted to control the lucrative Indian Ocean trade, yet the Masri also wanted to control the same trade, which resulted into conflicts. The coastal governors or Masri were tired of foreign rule and hence wanted to be independent after chasing away the Portuguese. Therefore, they did not wish to be under a new colonial master. The Masri governors of Mombasa had declared themselves independent of Oman rule, and this had to be challenged by the Busedi rulers, who looked at it as a form of rebellion. The coastal governors hated the corruption and ruthlessness harshness of the Oman rulers, or governors known as the Walis, that had been appointed to administer the coast. The coastal people also hated the high taxes imposed on them by the Oman rulers. The Masri governors or rulers, they believed that they were the rightful rulers of Mombasa, and that even the Portuguese found them as rulers of the coast. The Busedi, on the other hand, maintained that they had the right to govern the coast as a compensation for liberating it from the Portuguese oppressive rule. The Busedi wanted to use the favourable coastal climate for agriculture, and this could only be done after the defeat of the Masri rulers. Masri rulers had a constant supply of manpower from the interior tribes like the Nika, which gave them morale to fight for their independence. The conflicts also broke out because the Oman rulers lacked a strong and effective administration at the coast. This was because they were preoccupied with enemies in Arabia. East African history. The Oman Arabs at the East African coast. NB. When Said came to power, he managed to bring the coastal struggles to an end. The course of the Busedi-Masri conflicts. In December 1698, Fort Jesus fell in the hands of the Oman Arabs after chasing away the Portuguese. In 1728–1729, the Portuguese recaptured Mombasa, but they were driven out with the help of the Oman Arabs. In 1741, the Yoruba Sultan Saif ibn of Oman appointed Mohammed ibn Othman of the Masri family to be the governor of Mombasa. He was expected to be loyal to the ruler of Oman. Shortly after this, the Yoruba ruling family was overthrown by the Busedi ruling family in Oman. The Busedi dynasty therefore became the new rulers of the Oman Empire, and a new sultan, or ruler of the Oman Empire called Sultan Ahmad ibn Sid, was installed after the murder of the Yoruba Sultan. The Masri governors at the coast and Mohammed ibn Othman of Mombasa refused to recognize Sultan Ahmad ibn Sid's administration. The Masri governors therefore declared themselves independent because to them, the Oman rulers were supposed to come from the Yoruba family and not the Busedi family. Sultan Ahmad ibn Said of Oman therefore decided to wage war against the Mazri Arabs. In the chaos that followed, Muhammad ibn Uthman, the governor of Mombasa, was killed in cold blood, which greatly annoyed the Mazri at the coast. Ali ibn Uthman, a brother to the murdered governor, took over power as the ruler of Mombasa, and he was determined to defend the Mazri power at the coast against the Oman Arabs up to the bitter end. Ali ibn Uthman continued with the expansion of Mazri influence at the coast, and by 1807, the Mazri territory stretched from Pengani to Melindi. By this time, it was only Kilwa that was loyal to the Oman Arabs. In 1807, the Mazri conquered Pate but failed to conquer Lomé. In 1814, the Mazri governor tried to get support from the British. However, by the time he did this, the British had already signed an agreement with his East African history, the Oman Arabs at the East African coast. In 1817, Said said freed Pate and ordered all her subjects not to trade with the Mazri in Mombasa. He also ordered Zanzibar to liberate Pemba and Brother from the Mazri rule. Said said also attacked Pemba in 1822 and drove out the Mazri governor, hence expanding the Busedi influence. In 1824, Said said personally commanded the forces that bombarded Mombasa and almost brought the Mazri self-rule to an end. Mazri rulers finally accepted Oman rule after that defeat. However, when Said said went back to Oman, the Mazri governors again stopped recognizing the Oman rule. He returned in 1829, but he failed to defeat the Mazri, who had got support from the Nika in their struggle. It was Said said's son Khalid who captured Fort Jesus, the headquarters of the Mazri, and threw some of Mazri family members and the governor in the Indian Ocean. In 1837, Said said tricked some of the Mazri family members and took them to the Persian Gulf, where he starved them to death. This ended the long-time conflict between the Mazri and the Busef families. The coast was once again brought under one ruler, Said said. In 1840, Said said transferred his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar to completely end the power struggles at the coast. He got the support of his new fiends, the British, to strengthen his military position so as to be able to rule the coast and Oman effectively. The results of the Busedi-Mazri conflicts. Because of the conflicts, Mombasa declared herself independent from the Oman rule. The conflicts led to the destruction of property. For example, Fort Jesus was destroyed in 1741. Mazri's influence was extended to most of the coastal towns. The conflicts increased the divisions among the coastal towns. For example, Zanzibar remained loyal to Oman rule, but there was resistance to Oman rule in some towns. The coast was later placed under Oman control and there was temporary peace. East African history, the Oman Arabs at the East African coast. The conflicts led to the loss of lives. For example, in 1837, Mombasa was attacked, which left many people dead. The conflicts made Said said to transfer his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar so as to establish effective control over the East African coast. In conclusion, the results were largely negative, or were political, social and economic, or were long-term and short-term. The reign of Sultan ibn Said said 1840–1856, ruler of Oman and Zanzibar. Said said was born in 1791 in Muscat, which was the capital city of Oman. He was born to Sultan ibn Said Ahmad of the Busedi family. His father died in 1804 and left the entire empire in the hands of his two sons. Because of the tender age, Said said was 13 years old and therefore power was entrusted to their cousin, who was called Badir ibn Saif. In 1806, at the age of 15 years, Said said felt he was old enough to rule Oman and he decided to kill his cousin. The murder was motivated by the rumor that their cousin was planning to kill them, Said said and his brother. While in power, Said said faced a number of problems like opposition from his family members, conflicts between the tribes and Oman Sea pirates, and conflicts between the Bused and Mazri families. In 1840, he transferred his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar. Unfortunately, Said said died in 1856, having done much for the coast and East Africa as a whole. Why Sultan ibn Said said transferred his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar. Said said wanted to be close to Mombasa because of its rebellious nature. Said said had greatly admired the cool coastal climate. Fertile soils also attracted Said said because they could support close growing. Zanzibar had good natural harbours which would allow big ships to land easily. He wanted to control the lucrative Indian Ocean trade rather than leaving it to his relatives, who were corrupt and unreliable. The East African coastal people were considered to be more loyal to Said said than the East African history, the Oman Arabs at the East African coast. Said said also wanted to establish regular trade links between the East African coast and the interior of East Africa. Said said also wanted to exploit the cheap slave labour at the coast to use on his clove plantation. Said said also wanted to gain popularity and prestige as a ruler of two territories at the same time. Zanzibar also had a security advantage since it was an island and it would offer maximum protection naturally compared to Oman. Said wanted to end the Bisedi-Mazri conflicts once and for all. Zanzibar was strategically located as a market for goods, and this would enable him to control and expand the interior trade. Said also had the belief that the waters of Zanzibar were sweeter than those of Oman, and this forced him to shift his capital from Muscat to Zanzibar. He also wanted to check on the activities of the Indian Ocean Sea pirates. Religious persecutions in Oman forced him to shift his capital to Zanzibar. Effects or changes introduced by Said in Zanzibar. Said developed the cloth industry in Zanzibar, and today Zanzibar is the leading producer of clothes. He signed commercial treaties with European countries, for example Britain in 1839, France 1844, Hungary 1844, Germany and US, which attracted many foreign traders at the coast. He transformed Zanzibar into an intraport, i.e. it became an international market for traders from all parts of the world. Encouraged trade with interior tribes of East Africa, e.g. Yao, Nyamwezi and Sukume, who always supplied slaves. He fought sea pirates with the help of the British Navy, which brought about peace and increased trade on the Indian Ocean. He organized personal caravans into the interior of Africa to bring goods to Zanzibar, hence encouraging the development of long-distance trade. He invited the Indian Banyans to settle along the coast, who advanced loans to the Zanzibaris. East African history. The Oman Arabs at the East African coast encouraged Europeans to open up trading posts in Zanzibar to increase trading activities, e.g. in 1844 the Germans opened up one, managed to end the quarrels that existed along the coast between the Bisedi and Mazrui. He attracted foreigners to Zanzibar, for example Arabs, Indians, Europeans, and this created a population of mixed culture. Said was also involved in the signing of treaties to end slave trade and slavery in East Africa. For example, in 1822 and 1845 he signed treaties with the British. Socially, Said encouraged the spread of Islam and built many Quranic schools. He also encouraged the spread of the Swahili culture along the coast and the interior of East Africa. He united the coastal towns under one leadership. He also encouraged use of Sharia law of administration and injustice. Why the Arabs had little interest in the interior of East Africa before 1500 AD. They were mainly interested in spreading Islam at the coast, hence no need to penetrate into the interior. African middlemen always brought goods to the coast, and therefore no need for Arabs to penetrate into the interior. The Arabs lacked serious competition at the coast due to their small number, hence only concentrating at the coast. Some came to the coast as political refugees and therefore did not want to look for more trouble in the interior. They lacked the knowledge about the economic potential of the interior of East Africa. The Arabs also lacked the geographical knowledge about the interior of East Africa and hence feared getting lost. Language barrier also forced the Arabs to concentrate at the coast because they could not easily communicate with the people in the interior. Absence of well-developed transport means into the interior also forced the Arabs to neglect the interior. East African history. The Oman Arabs at the East African coast interior tribes didn't welcome the Arabs because they had more known their importance. Hostile tribes in the interior of East Africa also scared away the Arabs from the interior. Inter-tribal and civil wars were rampant in the interior, and this created insecurity which scared away the Arabs. Wild animals like lions and thick forest also made the Arabs fear the interior. The good coastal climate also presented good living atmosphere for the Arabs, and they forgot about the interior. Why they finally developed interest in the interior of East Africa after 1500 AD. The Arabs developed the urge to exploit the abundant trade opportunities in the interior. Increased demand for interior goods forced the Arabs to go into the interior and acquire the goods, e.g. slaves. The arrival of Said in 1840 also led to increased Arab penetration into the interior due to increased demand for slaves to work on his clove plantations. Presence of Indian Banyans who gave traders loans to go into the interior for goods also led to Arab penetration into the interior. Arabs had got knowledge about the economic potential of East Africa's interior, which forced them to penetrate into the interior. Prominent Arab traders like Tipu Tip had already settled in the interior and therefore invited others into the interior. African leaders like Muti Sai of Uganda and Mirambo of the Nyamwezi invited many Arabs into the interior due to the need for guns. Population increase of the coast also forced the Arabs to penetrate into the interior to occupy the free land. The desire to spread Islam in the interior also forced the Arabs to penetrate into the interior of East Africa. The stiff competition for trade items at the coast also forced the Arabs to penetrate into the interior and acquire cheaper goods. The need to do away with middlemen also led to the Arab penetration into the interior so as to earn more profits. The presence of guns also ensured security for the Arabs since they started venturing into the interior. East African history. The Oman Arabs of the East African coast